Hi guys, welcome back to You Are Here. I wanted to do a little rant of my personal opinion on this recent topic of deep cuts and ODESZA backing out of one of the lead roles. Just to give a little context. So this week, over 100 Latino actors, artists, and storytellers have signed an open letter to Hollywood calling to increase the presence of Latino voices in early stages of development and greenlighting rooms, as well as the amount of Latino actors in auditions and non-stereotypical lead roles. This letter comes shortly after Marty Supreme star ODESZA dropped out of a Sean Durkin's A24 film, Deep Cuts, based on the novel by Holly Brickley and starring Drew Starkey and Kaylee Spaney. I think it's Kaylee, or it's not Callie, is it? It doesn't matter. Look, I know I've said this a million times on this channel, but if you're new here, my name is Danielle. I am a 90s baby. I grew up with TV as my babysitter. I fell in love with film at a very early age. And yeah, so I was looking at all these comments from different videos here on YouTube talking about this topic specifically. And some of these comments were just like fucking ridiculous to me. Especially there's just so much hypocrisy. I saw so many comments of people saying it's acting, it's just acting, it's fictional characters, and so on and so forth. And one comment in particular that said, "You'll only ever see a white person expected to do this. Meanwhile, there's a long list of white characters portrayed by other races in film." That is one of the most ignorant statements I have ever heard in my life. It is completely inaccurate. So let me backtrack a little bit. So I grew up watching a lot of 90s television, and I think all of us in general look for some sort of representation of sorts in film and media, right? We're looking for pieces of ourselves. And I think growing up as a brown or black person, we were extra looking for ourselves in media, in film, in television. And, outside of my home, I was picked on a lot for being a tomboy or not looking one way or the other in regards to my ethnicity, right? And oftentimes when I was watching TV, I would find myself really liking a show when I would see either like Journey or Naya Rivera. These two were often cast in like my favorite family and kid TV shows, and I would always spot them out and gravitate towards them because they looked like representations of me, at least to me, as a kid looking for that. And these characters were often always portrayed as tomboys, which I very much was. So that was my representation growing up, but it was very small. And, I learned at a very early age, especially from my mother and her film knowledge, that back in the day, a lot of white actors would portray ethnic characters, and they would be painted brown and or go and get tans, right? And then cut to college, I take a class about musical theater history, and that's where I learned more in depth about vaudeville and blackface and what is it, the jazz singer? Yeah. So, with all that said, I feel like I can safely say, as a person of color, that, going back, being a kid, I grew up observing mainly white people in television and film and media. Growing up with that, your initial thought, especially if you're already having a hard time with your self-love and respect and are being picked on for certain things, then you go home and you watch TV and it's just a whole bunch of white people. You start to get this sense of that unfortunate phrase of white is right? And you try to appeal more to that notion of life than to accept yourself, because clearly your appearance is not being accepted, not only in your real life, but it's also not being accepted on screen, right? So that's how I grew up, and I know that a lot of people of color grew up like that. I don't feel like enough people take into account that since the very beginning of film, television, literacy, comic books, everything that was commercially acceptable was made and presented by white people for white people. It wasn't for us. So that has always been the primary basis of representation. It's kind of hard to put your foot in the door into these spaces when there is no space for you. So to see comments like that, saying that there's a long list of white characters portrayed by other races in film, that is the biggest crock of shit that I've ever heard. You can literally, like I just did right now, I went and did that search, found a whole bunch of different, like, top 25, top 10, top 50, top, so on and so forth, of so many actors that are white that portrayed other ethnicities in films. There's a whole bunch of different ones with a whole bunch of different actors. You add them all up, that is more than a long list, and those weren't even going all the way back to the beginning of film and its creation. These were more like from 60s on up. My first thought in reading that comment is thinking, okay, you're just one of these people that bitches about people of color representing characters that you have always been used to being white. My brain instantly went to The Little Mermaid, right? So many people were pissed off about a cartoon character having their ethnicity switched to a black character. First and foremost, this is a fucking mermaid. I think you can make a mermaid whatever color you want to make it. There are so many interpretations of The Little Mermaid. That's what my brain is thinking of. I've also seen recent comments talking about Spider-Man being black, and it's like, okay, do you not realize that the very much shorter list than what you're describing is only geared to spaces that people feel are safe enough to take this chance? Snow White aside, that was a risk. I'm talking about production companies feeling more safe changing the ethnicity of a mermaid because of the same reasons I just said. It's very impractical to get mad about something like that. And then also, you go into the Spider-Verse, which is for one a cartoon, and also Miles Morales is one of many Spider-Mans from different universes, which makes it okay. He's not taking over the overall persona of Peter Parker. you're complaining about people of color being put in spaces that production companies are like, I think we can get away with this because of this, and we'll make it harder for people to complain about it because we'll make it like, well, we're not technically doing this. That's the only reason that it's okay. So even then, it's not really a win for us, is it? But nobody is trying to erase or over color code characters. It's different interpretations of something that isn't necessarily geared to race. You know, all these comic book characters were made primarily by white people, so of course they're all white. And you get Michael B. Jordan as Johnny Storm, and people lose their shit because Johnny's supposed to be white, and it's like, well, Johnny's only white because he was made by white people. All these comic book characters are white because they were made by white people. I think you can make a little room for Johnny to be a different ethnicity, especially in a different interpretation of the Fantastic Four. But whatever, right? And just like the same thing, people would go apeshit and lose their mind if Superman was black or brown or whatever, right? Anything but white. But at the end of the day, Superman is an extraterrestrial being. Kind of in the same cadence as a mermaid having their ethnicity changed. Like, does it really fucking matter to you? Like, at that point, we're talking about something else, which is racism. It's, you're racist and you don't want to see what you grew up as your representation changed into something else, right? When all representation, as I've stated before, has primarily been based on white. You can't manage to like make a little wiggle room for a couple characters that at the end of the day aren't even human. What does that say about you? Like, really, because really that is what it comes down to, is why are you really upset about this? But anyways, I just think it's funny, like, seeing all these comments on here with people saying, like, it's acting, it's just acting, and blah, blah, they're fictional characters. Like, these are the same people that will complain about everything that I just said, about a mermaid's ethnicity being changed. These are the same people that complain about that. It's hypocritical. It's only defending and using that phrasing to fit your own narrative. You know, similar to the hypocrisy we're seeing right now with all these people that would drop on the floor kicking and screaming, fighting for their gun rights, are now the people opposing it, right? Yeah, but anyways, it's that type of shit. It's like, stop making excuses for what you really want to say. I commend ODESZA for backing out of this role. I've never read Deep Cuts. I had no idea like what the issue was. And I see that I saw glimpses of like the character being Mexican and Jewish. And then I'm like, well, then my brain started going like, okay, well, what's the racial dynamic here? Like, you know. And then I started reading more into it, and then actually seeing that the character's name is Zoe Gutierrez. So yeah, that doesn't work. That does not work for ODESZA playing that role. And she was smart to back out of it, and I'm glad that she had the integrity to do so, because a lot of people would not. Somebody like, say, Sydney Sweeney cast in that role, she wouldn't have backed out of that because she has no integrity. But anyways, there's some other comments that I saw. Isn't it just called acting? An Irishman won an Oscar for playing a New York Jew. And then somebody else responded in the comments, Steve Martin played a poor black child. I'm not gonna lie, I thought that one was funny. Yeah. And if you don't know that reference, look up the jerk. Yeah, somebody else put not smart, work when you can. Careers in this business are short as it is. And I'm glad I saw some people respond like, yeah, sometimes, but she comes from money, so I respect her giving it up on principle. Rich people can afford morals. Yeah, somebody else had put like similar response to that and mentioned like Kendall Jenner and saying like, yeah, Kendall Jenner has straight up said like she just models when she feels like it. You know, Kendall Jenner takes up space in the modeling world whenever she feels like it. She doesn't need it, right? So it's just stuff like that. And I totally, of course, just agree with comments like that. It's like, especially under those conditions of like Nepo babies, like you already have a presence, you already have money. If you can, you know, like you can afford to not take up space. But, you know, that's just one factor of it. You shouldn't be taking up space, you know, in fields where other people are struggling. And even with that, I was thinking, because like recently I was looking into these stories of people who were Black but white passing. And some of these stories, I was like, damn, these would be really good movies. Like, why haven't they made these? And I was like, probably because, especially in the past, it'd be very ignorant to just cast a, say, like a white man in this role because he's white passing. And it's like, that's not what you need to do. You need to actually get an actor who is white passing. There are a lot of them and put them in that role. It's not that hard, but a lot of people just don't want to do things like that. But also that cuts to coming back to this. Like I was thinking like, well, that seems like an odd combination, but that's not really a space that I know much about, right? But I'm like, how many actresses out there are, you know, Mexican and Jewish? And then cut to me seeing this other video where they're talking about Alexa Demie. And she is actually Mexican and Jewish. Alexa Demie is an amazing actress. Like, have you seen Waves? Waves is a great movie. But Waves aside, obviously look at her in Euphoria. She's an amazing actress and she hasn't gotten any praise for it compared to her co-stars, right? Like Sydney Sweeney has gotten more praise just off of her looks, off of being in that show, and Alexa Demie hasn't gotten anything from it. It boggles my mind. But back to the point, it's like you actually have an amazing actress who is of the description of this character. Why not cast her? It's like you want to just keep going with, especially because it's an A24 film, you want to go with one of your biggest A24 actresses right now, which is Odessa. You just want to keep throwing her into a whole bunch of movies because she's popular right now, just like they do with everybody. But you're not actually going off of who should actually be playing that role. And that's not to slight Odessa at all. I've been a fan of hers since I watched her in Grand Army back in 2020. She's a great actress. She was great in Marty Supreme. And I don't doubt she would be great in this role, but it is not her space. And I know a lot of people just aren't going to agree with that or get why John Leguizamo and over 100 other Latino creators are fighting for that space, you know, and it's sad that they don't understand why. But it's the same reason as me talking about growing up and only having 2 representations that I would look out for in TV shows that made me feel connected to what I was watching, made me feel connected to a storyline or what have you, right? Like, 2 kids were that representation for me out of all the TV shows I was watching, out of all the movies I was watching. That's what the damn point is. Like, that's what they're fighting for. That's what so many of us fight for. That's why representation is so important. You know, it's just, it means something and it's worth fighting for. And I will leave some links to lists in here in the description, because like I said, I found so many, and so many like famous ones. Like, I saw somebody else in here in the comments saying like, oh, yet Al Pacino's played like 2 Latino characters and nobody had a problem with that. It's like, how do you know nobody had a problem with it? These films were primarily made and backed not by people of color. A lot of these famous films were not backed by people of color. How do you know who was okay with it? Just because it made a lot of money, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean that people were okay with it. Look, the movie Tropic Thunder. A lot of Black people don't have a problem with Robert Downey Jr.'s character. But a lot of people did have a problem with it. But did that stop the film from making a shit ton of money and becoming super fucking popular? No. It doesn't fucking matter the commercial success of something. That doesn't mean that people were okay with something. It just means it had the right backing and enough, you know, yeses to overpower the no's, right? So that comment is really fucking irrelevant. And it's stupid. Again, I'll leave links so you can see the variety of different lists out there that exist from the beginning of filmmaking to now, where white actors have taken spaces of ethnic characters. And even just a quick example, like, and this is like one of the more recent-ish examples. You have Exodus, Gods and Kings, which I can't believe I still can't believe they did that. Casting white actors, Christian Bale, Joel Edgerton as Egyptians. Similar to when they made Cleopatra, right? You have The Conqueror. John Wayne portrayed Genghis Khan. And John Wayne was one of the most racist motherfuckers that ever lived. Prince of Persia, The Sands of Time, Jake Gyllenhaal was cast as the lead. Oh yeah, Rooney Mara as Tiger Lily in Pan in 2015, Johnny Depp as Tonto in The Lone Ranger. The list goes on, and like I said, those are even more like recent ones, which is like, why is this still even happening to that degree? What was that one? There's like another one with Scarlett Johansson that really got a lot of backlash for her playing a character where the origin of that character was of Asian descent. Like, yeah, just, I don't know, dude. But that's my rant. It just bothers me deeply, the hypocrisy of it all, and people just not seeing that there's still not a healthy branch of representation in film. And even when we create our own spaces, we still get knocked down by, you know, what media feels should be praised and rewarded. But anyway, Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will catch you next time.